All right, welcome everybody to the Sprint Jump Throw Performance Podcast. I'm your co-host, Joel Reinhardt, along with Andrew Cormier. Very lucky today to have on Fergus Connolly. He is a author, consultant, kind of performance coach, and the author of Game Changer, Process Part 1 and 2, 59 Lessons, and the new just came out, the Happiness Handbook. And all of those can be found on Amazon. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, thank you for having me, guys. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, for sure. So we previewed this briefly before we started recording, but our first question. So when we definitely have latched onto this, me and AC, and I think a lot of others in the performance realm are as well, is seeing the importance of viewing performance through that four coactive model that you introduced in Game Changer, and then have expounded on in other things. And when you do, it's not just the four in isolation, but how they interact. And when you recognize this importance, the importance of the director of operations goes through the roof in terms of running a smooth operation from an entire building standpoint. And I know you at Michigan had that title of director of operations, and you said that you actually wanted to take that on because of that importance. So maybe just dive into like how much that operations role helps in making a smooth, coactive model.
Yeah, great question. I think when you take a step back and you look at any performance group or an athlete, there are two things. One is effectiveness. So how well you can do your job in one instance. Do you have all of the qualities there? So if you take like a high performance department, do you have a good strength staff, nutritionists, psychologists, coaches, just as an example? Or if you've got an athlete, are they strong? Are they fast? Are they, mentally tough? Whatever that might mean. If you've got a team, have you got, if it's a soccer, basketball team, have you got all of the elements? And if they can perform well in single instances, or repeatedly, then the real area for improvement is in efficiency. And that's where probably one of the greatest rooms for improvement is from an organizational perspective. And that's something that if you don't get that in place, you end up wasting a lot of money, a lot of time, you create a lot of issues, you create just more silos. And from an operational perspective in any elite group, efficiency is incredibly important. And that's one of the areas that organizations that do things well really optimize. And that doesn't mean increasing the size. In fact, very often it means making things leaner, because by definition that is more efficient. It's doing something and doing it with less energy. And one of the things that it's kind of like a paradox, but when you have a team, for example, that plays well, they begin to execute like a pattern of play at the same level, maybe at a higher quality, becoming more effective, but it actually costs less energy because they can do it now seamlessly. That's efficiency. It's doing the same thing better, but with less energy. And that's really what you're trying to do. You're trying to become more efficient, more streamlined, while maintaining or even improving the quality of what you do. And that allows you then save energy, conserve energy for other things, chaotic things that might happen.
Yeah, I was even Shadid and I were talking about it the other day, and like just viewing our own where we've been at in our careers is the strength coach, and we've naturally ended up having very tight relationships with our director of ops, especially like the really good ones, because it wasn't just like, hey, we're going to lift it and have groups at 8, 9, and 10. It was like, all right, when are we fitting in breakfast? When's lunch going to be? Like all those sorts of things, like on a road trip of just like, all right, when's the best time to put dinner? When's and the best director of ops were seeking advice on that of like, hey, here's what logistically I can get done, but what's the best way to do it? And that we almost just realized that we're like our director of ops, equipment manager, chief of staff, or that position usually has different names at different places, but we end up interacting a lot. And I feel like the performance team that gets talked about a lot is like sport coach, athletic trainer, or medical and strength coach, when in reality some of the performance team that ends up helping the logistics of the athlete ends up being oftentimes like sport or strength coach and director of ops, and then like equipment manager almost too. This has been interesting to see as I've gone along through different jobs of like, oh, when the director of ops is on point, like it just takes other stress away from the athlete because they're not having to worry about some of those other things.
Yeah, there's so many elements. Like I worked at organizations where like you said, the travel would be organized separately, so you'd get a schedule that you had no forewarning of. So you didn't, maybe you couldn't get a proper cool down in or whatever, or you're rushed to get something done. And in some cases, the director of ops is the person ordering food. You know what I mean? Which is you turn up and this meal arrives and you're going, what, where did this come from?
Yeah.
You've got even small things like scheduling rehab, scheduling treatment, knowing what the buffer time is needed between certain activities.
Is this my internet or his?
I think it says.
I got you.
Sorry, did I get cut off?
You did. You're back now, though.
Okay.
Cool.
So you can edit this.
Oh.
One other thing though that is really important is even like being on the road and knowing where the different resources are. So for example, if you're going to play a game somewhere, like where's the nearest hospital? Where are the nearest police station? Knowing what the hotel is like, the layout. Like there's so many things that actually make you better, and they're not rocket science. You could, I can tell you stories about getting, asked questions about really detailed biomechanical or neuroendocrine responses in athletes, and then you go and you're visiting or you're working with the team, and you see from an operations perspective what a circus it is, and you're just going, these are simple things that you can get in place. Meanwhile, you're worried about, asking about creating some or spending money worth still on some other training aspect that might only affect 0.001%. Meanwhile, your food is 60 minutes late, or it's poorly prepared, or the buses aren't on time. Small things like that make such a difference.
Yeah. And even, I guess I should have added when I was talking about that, like true performance in a college setting, it ends up being the academics as well. Because like you're touching on, like we could be asking, we could have this perfect periodization plan, and the kid shows up for lift and he hasn't eaten all day because there was no communication, and he went from class to a tutor right to a lift, and he didn't have time to eat, like things like that I completely agree with.
Yeah, or a kid, the other aspect is, a kid struggling with something, the first you notice is that a kid blows up at a coach. Coach says something and he just blows up. And the next thing, all the coaches see this as a sign of ill discipline. They're on his back. But, director of operations, either forgot to inform or wasn't even aware of that the kid's struggling with 2 or 3 classes, has had a bereavement, whatever it might be, things that actually matter. That affect the kid, and that's where it becomes important. And again, it goes back to training the person or helping the person, coaching the person, not just an athlete.
Yeah. And when we're looking at things that, we're talking about how important like director of ops and taking everything into account is, within your experience, what is something that maybe you see within organizations that's like overemphasized that really isn't that important?
The sport. Like, I mean, I think what's interesting is that when you see, practice and you see the quality of practice maybe deteriorate, often then the first reaction is, oh, let's push, let's do more. My reaction very often, particularly halfway through the season, is what can we take out here from everything else to allow that performance come up? Because these guys, first of all, they love the sport, or girls, they love the sport, they can play the sport. It's probably not the actual practice that's causing the issues. It's very often things outside of it. And like I said, from an operational perspective, a logistical perspective, if everything else is seamless and is running well and the oil is working well, you're actually taking stress off those gears so they run smoother. And so when, the kid or the guy or the girl turns up to practice, now they don't have to worry about those things. They can spin that practice gear as fast and as hard as you want them to. And that's one of the things we think. It's about adding more into the system. It's really about taking things out of the system so that the athlete and the coaches as well can work very well together. One thing that I think we often ignore as well is the benefit of this to the coaches. Operationally, when something's going to happen, we can look after them. We can look after their welfare as well, their time with their families, getting information to them as early as possible so they can plan things, so their wife and kids know, well, he's going to be home at 6:30 on Wednesday, so we can actually spend time with him, and keep the coaches' health and welfare paramount as well. So it's not just about, it's primarily about the athlete, but also about coaching staff welfare.
Yeah, absolutely. We've even seen that. Our shameless plug for our director of ops, but he's been fantastic. And it's like almost little things that you don't even think about. Like you're saying, it's addition by subtraction, where it's like, oh, I didn't have to go worry about XYZ, and you don't even think about it until a little bit later, where it's like, it's maybe something that you did have to worry about in a previous job. And then you're like, oh, I feel like I'm missing something. Like I missed out on something. But you're like, oh wait, it's just something that got taken care of. So now I can spend brain space elsewhere.
Exactly. And I talk about spare mental capacity. What you have is you've got athletes, or you've got staff that, if that's being run well, there are things then that they don't have to worry about. And there is a certain amount of structure, habit, and routine that's just removed stress. So now the goal is to allow people concentrate on the things that they are good at and that really matter with very, very high quality, and remove everything else, to get rid of everything else. And it's interesting, like, I mean, there's a structure and chaos. So in a high performing organization, you need SOPs, like you need standard operating procedures. You need a certain amount of routine, habit, and expectation, so that the things that are chaotic can be concentrated on, like the game, those things. And so that's that balance that you want, and you want that structure in place so that you can have as much preparation as possible. It's never truly controlled, but you want to be as prepared as possible for whatever's going to happen. And then and the benefit of that as well is that when the competition comes, or when the pressure comes, you can be relaxed because you've got a certain amount of preparation in place. So now you can respond to whatever chaos, arrives.
Yeah.
I think that's something, Joel, like you and I have talked about that with just like our own routines in our own life, to like, we talk about automating the things that are really important, but if we make it a habit of doing those very consistently, and it's become so automatic for us that once we have like a weird hiccup in our schedule, it's not a problem. It's like we have meals made, or we know when we're always going to wake up at a certain time. We know how to fit that into the schedule, because so much has become automated, and it's like a standard operating procedure for your own life, essentially. It's just at that individual level. And that's kind of how we like teach the kids about it too.
Yeah, and recognizing as well that the routine is not concrete. It's there as a skeleton and structure, and it's there for purpose, but it can be changed. If you got to change it, change it. And never just create it and, revere it because it is a structure. It's there to be changed. If it needs to change, change it, come up with a better one, reestablish it. But the goal is always to allow the perception of security, because one of the things that causes us the greatest stress and consumption of energy is uncertainty, not knowing. Like anybody who's ever gone for a scan or medical procedure, the uncertainty between having it done and getting the results, that's what kills you. It's not the answer, actually. Very often you can deal with whatever the result is, or you're going to have to, but it's the uncertainty. It's the same in a weekly process. If you don't know what the schedule is like, or you can't plan something because you don't know if the head coach is going to throw in some crazy meeting at 7:30 in the evening, that doesn't help you. It just keeps you on edge. And so that's the benefit of it. That's why it's so important. And it's about balance.
Yeah. Now that you said that, I've even seen that where been around organizations or been in an athletics department where maybe another team that I didn't necessarily work with was getting exposed to, where they might even been really good with their schedule and like putting things in the right spot. So, setting people up for success, but they were just communicating it super late. And, instead of planning out a week in advance, it was like 48 hours. So then it was like, if I'm sitting here and I'm not sure what I'm going to be doing Thursday night, that adds a ton of stress, especially for like an 18 to 22-year-old, when you're preaching like, hey, time management, like got to find the spots where you can fit that term paper in. And you haven't actually let them know when they're going to be doing the required things. Like that absolutely adds a ton of load.
Yeah, and at the really elite level, I had a conversation with someone about this yesterday, but at the really elite level, what happens is if you think of your ability to perform on like a gear system, your standard is 3. You're in 3rd gear moving all the time. You at times, for highly stressful situations, need to go up into 5th gear, come back to 3rd, but then you need to switch off and go down, relax. What happens is over time, we're constantly going up, we're on edge, we don't know the uncertainty, we can't ever switch off completely. Well, then you end up getting burned out. That's what leads to, burnout, fatigue, irritability. But when you have a structured system in place and a routine, and that, okay, after we've done this, this, and this, I can switch off. Now you can switch off, relax, unwind, go do something else. That allows you then to reach that 5th gear when you need to. It's that plasticity of performance. Now that's at the pinnacle, but that's what really, really good organizations facilitate and allow.
Yeah. And I've even, like I forget which, might have been Peak Performance with Magnus and Stuhlberg, but they're talking about like the highest performers in any profession, whether it's like jobs or, Gates, some of these guys who almost like robotically and like autonomize the rest of their life to the point where other people are like, what? Like wearing the same thing every day, eating the same thing for breakfast, but it's just like removing decisions that they've decided don't matter.
Yes. Yeah. I used to do that. Like, when I would, at any team I would go to, you get a kit bag with, a huge amount of gear. To be honest, you're never going to wear it all. And I would, the following day, and I would hand back, like, I don't wear hoodies, you know what I mean? That I would go and hand back 3 or 4 hoodies and ask, listen, can I get 4 more of this exact polo top and this exact pants? And that's what I would wear every single day, because, and this is just me, who cares? Like, as long as you're tidy, clean, and you're in your uniform, that's it. It's just one thing you don't have to worry about. And also choosing what, you have a choice about what you're going to get annoyed about. And so you choose carefully. Look, if your favorite food's not there, well, just move on. It's not the most, there are things that are worth getting annoyed about. But to be honest, most things, just let it go. Choose where you want to use your energy and your stress.
Yeah.
I've even seen that's something that I think every single young coach, Joel and I were just talking about this not that long ago, of like every single young coach focuses way too much on like weight room stuff and get super upset by it when you're a GA strength coach because the sport coach wants to practice. And it's like, but we had this great setup for our squat cycle. Like, what's going on? But then as you get older, you're like, they're getting the work they need. It's not a big deal. And in my personal experience of working with coaches, like the older coaches I work with are like, oh, don't worry about that. It's not a huge deal. Like, don't stress out about that as long as they're doing this. Like, this is the most important thing. It's just like prioritizing.
Take a step back, look at the bigger picture. Now, the only proviso to that is, sometimes people, it's the motivation behind it. Like, so, if your kid's constantly coming late, like, if somebody comes a few minutes late, and they don't normally do it, and they might have a legitimate reason and they want to come and explain to you, it's okay. Don't worry about it. It's fine. Let's go, jump in, let's go. Now, if somebody's obviously not putting in the effort and you saw them, 10 minutes beforehand hanging around talking or chatting or wasting time, that's a different story. But again, it's choosing which battles you want to fight and in your own life. And the other thing too is that sometimes people get incredibly, they revere the structure with too much detail. And that then, so if they themselves are turning up for a workout and they're 5 minutes late, they're getting annoyed with themselves, and it takes them another 15 minutes to let it go and things like that. Like, choose carefully, so long as you get it done. And I years ago when I was doing my PhD, that's where I was first introduced to this idea of object-oriented programming. And basically, what that means is that you write small blocks of code, but you can move them around. So if it's a piece of code for a switch, well, you can reuse the code, but you can move it around. So you're not having to write things in linear. If you use that system in life, as long as I get it done, and the actual location of it is not as important as actually getting it done and getting it done in the right frame of mind. If you've got a phone call and somebody's 2 minutes late, some people are all, butthurt because I didn't make the call. Like, come on, worry about something that really matters.
Yeah.
Like, and road rage is the other one. Like, some guy cut you off, somebody's, or you're in the car with somebody gets cut off. I'm just going, whatever. Like, maybe, you don't know. Whatever.
Yeah, the person in the car doesn't even know that's happening either. That's the thing. It's like,
yeah, they might not know. But the other thing too is, like, you're going to get annoyed. You're going to try and make your point to them. You're going to get so stressed out about it, and the other person, doesn't care. I spoke with a really famous author. He was telling me about another guy who's a very good friend of his, and he was telling me about how this guy is world renowned. But I was asking him, does the criticism of what he's written not bother him? And he was going, no, he's onto his next book. He doesn't care. Criticism doesn't bother him. And I was blown away, because I was going, when you write something that you believe to be true, or you put it out there, like you're so conscious of it. And I hadn't written anything at the time. And he was saying, no, he said, you write it, you put it out there. It's never going to be perfect. You're always going to look back and go, that could be better. And the secret is not to let it bother you. And that was the best piece of advice I ever got. And I won't name the two guys, but it was phenomenal advice. Like, you choose what you want to get annoyed about.
Yeah. Even as we were talking through the removing barriers for the athletes, it's like in a college realm, I know it's different in a professional setting where it's just like perform. I was even thinking in the college setting, some of it is like the balance between preparing these young men for real life while also removing obstacles so they can perform right now, but not like setting an expectation for wait, I thought everybody just takes care of my meals and blah, blah, blah. Almost not setting them up for success right now while also letting them know, hey, the real world is not like this. And you're going to still have to learn some of these lessons to help yourself out later.
Yeah, that's a whole other ethical question, I think. In the sense that college sport is not about preparing people for life. It should be. I believe the role of sport is to prepare young people in a safe environment and teach them lessons through sport that will help them in life. But if you were to do that, you would do it in a completely different way. College sport's about winning games and making money for universities. That's it. But if you look at some other academies in other countries, what they will do is, you know, there's one or two that I know, and for the first few weeks, you don't actually play the sport or coach the sport. They actually send you out to building sites, to engineering factories, to accounting offices, and you spend the first 3 or 4 weeks, as an intern there. And the person that you're working for then writes a report on you when you come back, and it's got nothing to do with the sport, but the role is to expose people to what the potential is, young men in this case, to what life is like outside, teach them to understand, ideas about punctuality and, following direction and learning, showing respect, understanding what they could end up doing when they finish. Those are life lessons, and they're important lessons. And so that's a whole other ethical question. But it is about finding that balance. Like, one of the things as well is, like, teaching kids how to cook. I remember doing a cooking lesson one time with a group of guys, and the chef was showing somebody how to make just very basic, like, eggs, cheese, and toast. And there was a sudden commotion in the corner when one of the guys saw what an egg actually looked like, and saw the egg cracked open, saw the egg being made. To him, he had never, at 20 something years of age, thought eggs just came in a carton. And I'm just going, man, there's a lot of things gotta try and help people learn.
Yeah. And even moments like that make you realize, like, when you said what's overemphasized, and like sometimes it is the sport.
Well, yeah, I mean, what I mean is like, a lot of coaches, I think a lot of us, we don't realize that the easiest way, to, in many cases, make someone better or to improve a program is to take things out.
Yes.
And it's not about adding more about the sport, sometimes reducing it, sometimes just keeping it the same, but allowing the quality. It's about the quality of the performance. And the other area that probably people haven't discussed enough is the damage that bad practice. Like, one bad practice, I'll say it takes 3 bad practices to correct one bad one. Who knows? But it is significant. It makes a significant, or it does significant damage to that. I use the term elite performer, to their learning, because you learn from bad practice. You learn from bad experience.
Yeah. That was one of the things with some of my sport coaches. Like, when I first started, I've started at new jobs almost every year the past 3 years, but just, they were like asking how they can improve their practice. And I was literally like, don't do so much. Like, it'll be way better if the girls know, like, it's going to be like quick practice. It's going to be focused. They'll be in it if they know they're not going to get dragged for like 2.5 hours, essentially.
Yeah. And also, with 2 or 3 teams, and even with guys who train the preseason, we would do sprints. But on certain days, I would say, for you have 7, or you have only 3, 20-meter sprints today. And they're going, what? And this is in the middle of practice, whatever. So, no, you've only got whatever that number was. And sometimes it would be the roll of a dice. And I would do it in front of them. And so whatever number is coming up, that's all you've got. You don't get a second one. You don't get to do it again. Like, we'll do your warm up with that, but you're only getting this number of reps. And the rationale was that in a game, you don't know how many reps you're going to get. You don't know how many times you've got to sprint, but you better be darn sure that every one of those is at max effort. And that experience, it's not necessarily stress, but that realization for them was, oh, I've only got 4 reps. Every single one of these I need to ensure or try to be as perfect as possible. It wasn't about the effort, the max effort. It was about the speed. That they were going to get, 7 warm-up reps, and then I was only going to test 3. It was whatever number's coming up here, that's all you've got. Because on game day, you don't know how many you've got. And you're just going to have to put max effort in each time. And it's a really simple approach, but it was incredibly beneficial. And helped players really understand every single opportunity in the game I get is going to be max recruitment of everything I've got to sprint and move as fast as possible.
Yeah, we talked about that similar concept with Tony Holler a little bit ago, where it was, almost the reverse of that, of having the option of, not the reverse, but having the option of like, oh, I can just get that extra work after practice, can dilute the focus of the real targeted work like you're talking about. Like you're saying, I think the example we used was like baseball, like the number of guys who just go in the cage and just kind of like go through a million swings, whereas quality is probably going to go up if you say, hey, you've got 10 minutes or you've got 25 swings, go. Because quality inherently goes up because focus goes up. And there's not the crutch of like, oh, I can get my extra work later.
Yeah, and the other benefit of it as well is by explaining it to them, they walk away content that they have actually, given whatever number of reps, max effort, and they're secure. Whereas, if you keep going and you walk away after an hour of practice and you've not given 100% effort, that bugs you or annoys you or can be detrimental. Now, that's not to say that you don't have to have capacity and volume in there. You do. It's not about reducing the amount of work you do. It's about identifying the quality work. And so, yeah, you might go into the cage and swing in a relaxed way and warm up and that. But when it comes to your reps, like you say, those are quality. And the benefit of that is when you look at how athletes or high performers in any area choose how they make decisions, it's the idea that you've laid down a pattern that emotionally is as refined as possible, so that when that pattern emerges in a game, it can be recalled incredibly fast. That's what you're doing. There's a huge psychological element to this. It's not purely a physical thing. And particularly in chaotic sports, we have to react to patterns, movement. It's having that memory and that pattern that the athlete can recognize and respond to.
Yeah, that's a cool angle. I haven't thought about it in that aspect where, you almost hear it like in like a test taking realm, like, oh, if you're chewing gum while you study, you should chew gum while you take the test, or just like little things like that. But I haven't, just thinking about it like an emotional state part, like if everything in practice is super relaxed, it's probably not, or even if it's not physically relaxed, but they're in an emotionally almost relaxed state, then maybe that's not carrying over when it's more chaotic.
Well, yeah, but what also happens is, a pattern emerges on the field or on the court, and your brain recognizes that pattern. If it was a negative pattern, they're going to pause or stumble, or they're going to start to spin their wheels and go, what should I do? Or if they have a multitude of different patterns that it aligns with, they get confused. And what happens is, what you want them to do is to recognize the pattern as fast as possible, which means having only quality, really grooved images in their mind, as few as possible, so they can recognize it and act on it fast. And they need to be associated with some benefit or some sense of happiness, not fear. Because if it's pause, and that's what choking is. You see a fearful image, you choke. And now what the elite person does is they start to spin millions of images and they freeze. And you see it with golfing all the time, and you don't know what to do. Whereas when you've got people who are relaxed, who are in some state of happiness or contentment, they'll find that image quickly, recognize the pattern, and act on it because it's associated with a beneficial outcome. And there's some interesting research in California looking at, suggesting that the reason we make decisions is based on the emotional expectation, like what we expect the emotion to be when I do this. So I do something because I expect to be happy afterwards. And that's where I recall the pattern.
Yeah. I remember I'm like 2/3 of the way through Sapolsky's Behave right now. And he talks about some of that, where it's, even if you're almost like Pavlovian type response, where
yes,
even if you're not getting the food, the bell is now the thing. So, and it's the same sort of, I guess it can happen in a sporting setting as well. I've never thought about it in that aspect. That's cool.
Yeah, and the power of emotion Like, I mean, the fact that it's an emotional response that we're looking for, not necessarily the outcome that outcome triggers in us. Like, I mean, is that the key that and bear in mind then as well, what we're talking about is we're talking about instinct and intuition. So you see somebody who does something on the court fast, and they're acting on intuition or on on instinct, because they instinctually do something because that's become ingrained. Whereas intuition is where you process the emotion and then make the decision. So the goal really of elite performers in sport and conflict is for them to act on instinct where they're not thinking, but that instinct has been ingrained through intuition, through the emotional response that you know that it's going to give you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's cool.
And we start talking about operations.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, we said it before. The best ones end up just being absolute wormholes. But yeah, I mean, one of the next questions we had, and I'm interested to hear your answer, is that you for a long time were working directly with organized sports, whether it be
Mm-hmm.
professional, collegiate, rugby, soccer, football. Now that you've been removed from professional sport for a couple of years now, if somebody were to say, like, hey, Fergus, we want you for this job. Now that you've been removed for a little bit, what sort of things do you think you've picked out where it's like, okay, I would want this to be in place, this to be in place, in order for me to think I could do a successful job there?
Well, I still work with professional teams, but what I enjoy the most currently is helping develop others, on their pathway. So, if you're a performance director who, will call you with, for example, you've got a particular issue, it's helping them navigate and develop the skill set that they need to solve that problem. Or if you're a sports science director and you're okay, look, Fergus, what do I need to put in place now? I got COVID. We have these players coming in. What's the best way for me to monitor them?
Mm.
Where I get the most benefit is helping people develop their careers and skill sets, because that's where that for me personally, emotionally, that's where I get greatest enjoyment from. And it's not, I don't want to be, and I don't enjoy necessarily, I don't want to be the person who has all the answers. I want to help somebody else develop those. It's not important for me to get credit. It's not something, but helping seeing other people, and the other thing that it helps me a lot with is, even what is it, Tuesday, so Sunday, Monday, like, I mean, 2 or 3 challenges with coaches, or coaches came to me with challenges that they had to, it allows me to take the time then to formulate, okay, this is the structure of the solution that they're going to implement, and get it and learning from that and being able to share, look at, this is what I've done, this is what I've seen others done, and this is how I recommend you implement it and put it in place, and talk them through it. And so whether it's dealing with staff, hiring staff, staff development, or player interaction, or how you create the culture that's going to help get you that benefit. And every situation is different. So I get a thrill out of solving problems and helping seeing other people develop. Those are the 2 things that I enjoy the most.
Mm-hmm. How different do you see those interactions take place when it's you working for the organization versus in more of a consulting type role?
I think it depends. Like, I mean, depending on the sport or the structure, when you work across a number of different sports, there's so many different challenges. Now the principles are the same, but the challenge is different and there are nuances. So, if you've got, an NBA team, for example, in the bubble at the minute, they've got really new challenges. Like the same things, you got to get the same things done, but now you're in week 3. Now you've got like, athletes are getting bored, they're getting stressful, they're looking forward to getting to the game. So that's a unique challenge, and that's exciting, and being able to help people navigate that. Then you've got, the NFL, for example, is, worried about testing and trying to get a structure in place, and who are they going to have. And so for me, it's the excitement of the different challenges. When you're in there, then it's just a different set of it's a completely different approach, because you have to understand that it's about you and the culture and the relationships that you're building, and they're going to be there long term. And that's a really important awareness to be able to help coaches with, or sports scientists, strength coaches, is it's about a slow, steady progress. And in many cases with young staff, or even the college staff, it's explaining to them, they'll read something and they say, oh, I got to do this, Fergus, or I read this, I heard this. And it's being able to say to them, no, trust me, park that. This is the priority. Get that in place. We can take care of that, or you can address that later. But just because it sounds like the latest fad, that is not the priority at this moment in time. It's not the gator closest to the boat. I understand. I got you. Trust me. Trust me. That will take care of itself, or we will tackle that in 3 weeks or in 6 months' time.
Yeah, I could definitely see that being, having only worked in roles where I'm directly working for the organization, I could definitely see how much, if you're just in the consulting role and not necessarily having to worry about like, I hope this guy still likes me in 6 months. Maybe not the actual recommendation changes, but maybe the way in which it's communicated might change a little bit, if it's, whether it's in sternness or in how you go about getting it across.
Yeah, and also the other thing is that, when you're in, I'll use the term in the bubble, but when you're in like that cocoon of a team, it's really beneficial to have somebody outside of it that you can say, look, this is what I'm looking at, this is what I'm dealing with, what do you think? And being able to ask, and to have somebody who genuinely is going to ask what may appear like difficult questions or challenging questions, but they're just simply honest questions. Okay, you think you handle that well? Or, okay, I hear that you've got this challenge, this problem, but what are you doing wrong? And to be able to have that trusting relationship where the person will go, well, yeah, actually, I could have handled that better. Or, no, no, to be fair, actually, yeah, you do have a point. I could have done that a bit differently. It's difficult to get that within the organization, because there's so many different agendas and whatnot. And it's good to be able to have somebody outside of. The other one you get as well is, hey Fergus, I saw this team's doing this, should we be doing it? And you're just going, no. no, don't, please don't. But yeah, but they say that they're doing this again. But listen, trust me, just give it a few weeks, watch and see. Or I know somebody who's there and they've told me what the reality is, and what you read on ESPN is just complete nonsense. It's nothing like that. And, it's just being able to help people just navigate it. And also, people are at different stages of their career, different stages of the pathway of the team. Because, comparing what a team, I had this with an NFL team who, were comparing to what another team were doing. And they say, oh, they're doing this, this, and this. And I was saying, look, yes, but that group system processes have been there for 4 or 5 years. You're just going in there. You can't get to that level of complexity initially. Now you can try it, but you're going to fail. And this is the process that you need to go. And the other thing is, if you're doing something like, if I'm doing something now with a team, it would be very different from what I would even have done 12 months ago, because there's some things that have changed, some things you would drop. There are new developments. There's better ways of doing things. And so being able to understand like where people are in the process and on that team development pathway, all of those things are considerations.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you're saying too is almost from your role with asking questions is creating like a self-awareness for everyone involved in the organization as well. That way they're taking into account what is their exact situation, because it is one of those things that's very common is like, here's what other people are doing, we should probably do this. But it's like, let's holistically look at like what is in place for your specific situation right now.
Yeah, but the other real reason, to be honest, is about asking questions is that nobody likes to be told what to do. and very often, when you're in leadership positions and you're working with, I don't know, a high performance director or head strength coach or head therapist or whatever it is, and they're under pressure, the worst thing you can do is say, no, don't do that, do this. They don't want to hear that. People don't want to hear that in general. Like, I mean, you go to your wife and she tells you, you bristle straight away. But if you ask the right questions, like, you mean, I might know the answer. In many cases, you probably do know what the answer is, but you want to bring that person around to them seeing it from that perspective, coming up with the solution themselves so that they buy into it. And they're not going in tomorrow morning doing something just because Fergus said. It's, talked it through, I understand, I see, I'm going to try this and see how it goes. And more importantly, I know the reason why I'm going to do this. It's easy just to send someone a program or to send someone a structure or to send someone a protocol. Like, Christ, anyone can do that. But that's the difference between having, a relationship with someone where you actually genuinely do care about their success. And the other one then that comes up quite often is about, look, how do I balance this with my life? Where I've got, my family, I've got this job offer. It's, 2 states away, and, my wife's is happy to move and the kids, but I'm not sure if she really is. And just being able to talk it through and say, look, in the bigger picture, what's important. And so you might know what the answer is, and you could be 90% sure, but the best way the other person actually tell you that. And you can do that by asking just the right questions in the right way.
Yeah. An example that you me of was me and AC and our boss. This is the closest I've gotten to like a consulting role, or I don't work with field hockey at UMass, but we had a meeting with their head coach because she was just like interested in like, hey, how can I better plan my practices and my game weeks and all that. And I personally have never worked with the sport, knew nothing about the specifics of the sport, only knew like general performance principles. And so I ended up asking questions that to a field hockey coach was probably like, that's a dumb question in the specifics of field hockey, but it then made her like roll with answers, like almost explaining it in an elementary way helped lead to different answers than if it was, I researched the sport to a T and here's my recommendations. Like it was very different.
Exactly. And it's about understanding the principles. Like, I mean, and, recently it was with an NFL head coach. It was about scheduling and about, look, Fergus, I know you've got this model and this is what, but, we've done it this way before. Like what, should we change? And it's about going, well, why do you do it like that? And when the coach explained it, I went, based on what you've got, your talent, your stage, your development, that makes a lot of sense. But I might change this, or this is the reason that you might consider doing this. So it's about a conversation. Sure, you can go in and say, no, you absolutely got to do it this way, but that's not the way the world works. That's not the way. And one thing you have to bear in mind, I think, with people is that people love security, and they love someone who comes in and says, this is the system, this is the way to do it. Because now they don't have to think. The problem is that's not going to work because life is chaotic. Things are going to change. So by relationship, helping them understand, you in time make yourself, dispensable, but that's fine because now you've developed someone. So, rather than coaching athletes, it's really about coaching coaches. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing.
Yeah. I love that. Where it's like, it was a fun challenge too. Like, I know AC was in that meeting, but it was like, I know it was almost like it was a different situation for me because it was, most of the sport being around football. It's like, okay, I understand this enough where it's like, we were actually just talking about this before we got on talking with you, is like understanding the sport to such a high level that when we bring recommendations to the coach, they're like very detailed instead of just being like, practice needs to be backed off today, being like, hey, special teams is especially high speed yardage for us. Let's back off here. But being in the reverse situation was almost humbling, but then it also ended up being effective because it um, it just made for a more genuine back and forth conversation. I've been like, oh, I don't know that aspect of field hockey. Teach me about that quick, and then I can teach you about this other thing on the back end.
Well, yeah, and the other thing too is it's, you're being respectful of the other people's knowledge, experience. Like, and you should be. They're the coach. They've forgotten more than you'll ever be able to learn about, another sport. But even in the same sport, you go to another team or you work with another group. Like, these people have domain specific knowledge. Like, they know the environment, they know the culture, they know the players, they know the style, they know how people do things. So you have to be aware of that, respect that, get to understand and explain, why they do things. And, I had a conversation with the university. It was a hockey team as well. And it was, around that, it was very much around like, okay, so why do you, they sent me the schedule. And so at the start for me, it was, okay, so tell me why you do it. And they explained their logic, and I was going, okay, well, yeah, you can stick with this, and you can tweak these things around it to make it better. But I would stick with, based on what you told me and the reasoning and the travel and where you are, I would stick with the weekly structure. This is how I'd organize it. And then it's about, delving into, why they do things. But again, a lot of it does come back to just being respectful of, of what the person knows and what you don't know.
Yeah, it's almost like even like your effectiveness of, if you actually want to impact on change in that organization, as the consultant, you could say, well, I gave the recommendations X, Y, Z, and they just didn't listen. But then it's like,
yeah, and or like
teams, but like you're saying, if you want the outcome to be actually better.
Yeah, if you actually care, if you want to do your job, like, that's the difference between, trying to keep a job and do it. Like, if you want to keep your job, go and tell everyone they're great and this is exactly what you got to do. If you want to do your job, it's really about helping the other person be better. And it's not about you. It's about helping the coach talk through some things and think through things so that they can continue to go on and learn. And really, the goal of coaching coaches is about helping people learn how to learn and reminding them about, okay, this is, have you thought of this, or would you do it this way? Or let me explain an example of what I've done, how it didn't work for me, or how it did work for me, and would that work for you? Could you try that? And it all depends on the coach as well. Like, I'm not saying it's all cuddly all the time. There are times when sometimes you need to say, hey, hold on, I need you to listen carefully to me, because you're you're lying to yourself about this. This is what you need to hear. So it's knowing the person, knowing what they need to hear. Sometimes you need sometimes person needs a pat in the back. Sometimes they need a kick in the ass. It depends, but the goal is to help them. It's not about you.
Yeah. We actually we talked about this recently, where if we had, as young performance coaches, it's easy to just be like, yeah, sounds great. Like, well, almost being the yes man. We're talking about, if we put one of our head sport coaches as a reference, hopefully they all say like, yeah, they're great. But is that all they're going to be able to say? Because, they say, oh yeah, he's great, got him strong, whatever. Versus if it's like, yeah, he's great because he helped me with this little problem and challenged my thinking in this other area. And they're both positive references, but one is clearly, more advantageous than the other, especially for young coaches coming up.
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges that the industry has, like from a strength and conditioning perspective, certainly is the fact that it's become so certainty driven, and largely data-based, metric-based. That's brilliant. Everybody wants certainty. Like, they want to know, it's going to be X degrees and this guy did, X number of reps. But when you transition then out of the weight room or from your tempo running or whatever into the actual game, those metrics mean absolutely nothing, because the game's so chaotic. And so in other words, the sports coach has been measured by different variables than you are choosing to measure yourself by. And so, yeah, sure, you put another 3 reps on his bench or whatever, but you lost more games, or who cares? And so that's why when coaches start talking about or posting videos or posting numbers or gains or whatever, brilliant. Yeah, but did they actually did they become better players? And it's recognizing they're two completely different worlds. And you can create an echo chamber where you talk about sets, reps, and all of that. But hey, are they a better player? Like, can they play the game better? That's the goal.
Yeah, and we've even in the college setting, I know some of the certainty as it applies to job security has been. I know there's some people calling for like more medical models where people are like almost being removed from the coaches a little bit, and some of that's just from a firing standpoint. But even as a young coach who's in that situation right now, where being tied to a head coach, it's like, don't we want to be, as the performance professionals, getting as close to the sport as possible? So, like, even if it's, oh, we're going to remove ourselves from a hierarchy standpoint, like, make sure that doesn't also mean you're removing yourself from a performance standpoint and just going, like you said, oh, I put 3 reps on his bench, so check my box.
Yeah, so what, there's a few things there. What has happened in a number of instances are that because strength and conditioning coaches have either basically abused kids, whether it's culturally, whatever, or it's medically through rhabdo or God knows what, or caused injuries, and because that has been an issue. The industry needs to recognize that has happened.
Yeah.
And so then the automatic reaction is, the industry as a whole needs to change, and it needs to, because they have been largely health and welfare issues, let's put them under medical. Now, medical is a reactionary, prohibitive mindset. In other words, trainers and everybody else, they don't do prehabilitation. So their whole mindset is, well, let's err on the side of caution. So that's swinging the bar the completely opposite way from what performance should be, which is about, pushing, getting better. So now you put it under medical, and everything has to be approved by medics who, seriously, what does an athletic trainer or a doctor or somebody with medical training know about performance? It's not the same thing. But of course, then you've got powers that be that don't know any better, and that's what they want to do. So but the industry has permitted that. Like, strength and conditioning has, we only have ourselves to blame. And that's a common occurrence. It's a natural trend. It's a reaction to, whether you want to call it negligence or your goal is, first of all, not to do any harm to anybody. But, putting things under a medical umbrella, that's a nightmare for disaster. That makes no sense. But people are going to do it anyway. Because again, it comes back to this idea of, well, we've got certainty. We know now that it's not going to happen. And so you see it a lot in pro sport when guys get surgery and they come back. The first person to go to is the surgeon. The surgeon's going to say, oh, well, the tissue's going to take 3 months to heal. We know that's what it's going to take. But that's not got anything to, is not a reflection in terms of performance. So it's finding that balance. One of the best groups actually I saw were when Ted Rath was actually at the Rams. They had a brilliant joint performance model. That was one of the best I saw. It was very well. It was, the strength and conditioning and medical department were working together. Mm-hmm. That was a really, really good example, of a group that worked together. And if you can do that, I think you've got the best of both worlds.
Yeah. It's almost like, you're right. It's like a avoiding liability shift, because at the end of the day, ideally you avoid incompetence by having the people doing the hiring truly understanding what it takes to be good at that job.
I saw personnel people hiring strength coaches because of a rumor that some guy was good based on, this guy said this or this. Seriously, find somebody who knows something, not just what you're going to read or what you think. It's but again, this stupidity, but it's common sense. The only problem with common sense is it's not that common. but it comes back to, again, having authentic, honest conversations about, we're trying to create either a performance department or, a high performing team. Like, let's take ego out of the way and what we would want. How do we make things better, and what's the best way to move forward? Understand all aspects of performance, rather than just like, to use your word, a wormhole in one silo. That's not performance. We get caught up in the minutiae, and to be fair, for a lot of people, it helps them keep their job. The question that a lot of coaches got to ask is, as they walk through the gate each morning, are you going in to keep your job, or are you going in to do it? Two completely different things, and the choice is yours. It's up to you.
Yeah, something we talked about recently in regards to performance and even just like schooling is a lot of the things that were taught initially in like education systems is the weight room programs, and not really how to actually analyze sport and figure out what goes into performance. It's just like, here is 5-3-1.
Well, yeah, like, where did that come from? That came from powerlifting, like, and it works for powerlifting. But I used to use the example. It wasn't an analogy; it was an example of, like, in rugby. It's the same in football, but like, I use rugby because it's just a little bit more extreme. Because during the game in rugby, the strength coach takes the players out of the substitutes, takes the substitutes out of the area, and they go down behind, the end line, and they're doing some exercise as the game is going. So they're warming up. Now, he's mic'd, so if one of those players needs to be called, he sends him back and he goes on. So they're never out of the picture. But so during the game, the strength coach is either running on with water or they're warming up players. So they don't watch the game. They get home late. They maybe train one or two guys who didn't work out. Next morning, they're up doing pool recovery or whatever. And then they started to practice the following day. So no time during the game, after the game, or the first practice have they sat, watched the game, analyzed the game, heard what the coaches want. Like, I worked with strength coaches who were trying to make linebackers bigger, stronger, because, in his opinion, that's what they needed. And then you talk to the linebacker coach, or the defensive coordinator. That's not what he wanted at all. He wanted them lighter, faster. He didn't care about size. And that just goes to show the breakdown in communication, because there's an assumption rather than having that close conversation, understanding really what they want. And that's, again, about knowing the sport. Now, you don't need to be able to coach the sport, but you need to know what the coaches want and truly understand, what they want.
Yeah, I know part of as the timing of you releasing Game Changer was, right when I was getting out of my GA or around then, and took a ton of specifics from the book that I've been able to implement. But even then, even just seeing the level to which you break down the game and like what it was, game models and all that, it was like, I don't understand sport to this level. And that was the biggest, like, oh shit, and like the, yeah. Even if it's like you said, not being able to necessarily coach the sport, but like understand it to the point where conversations.
Yeah, well, like with Game Changer, what I wanted to do was show that, let's talk about the game for a moment, because we're still in an arms race about, like, let's make this guy 5% faster, 7. Who gives it? Like, if the guy can't play the game, it doesn't matter how fast he is. You're going to be fast running in the wrong direction, and that's what it starts with. And if you truly look at sport, like, because I would look at players who I'd made faster, and I'd fallen into that trap, but we weren't winning more games, or he wasn't playing better. Yet I'd made him faster, fitter, stronger, whatever. And then I would, you work with really elite athletes who are eating junk, and you're realizing, you would change their diet and they'd actually get worse, or they'd be unhappy. And so you're looking at these things, like you said, that you're taught. If you train this way, eat this way, do this, this is the secret to success. Well, hang on, it's a little bit more complex than that. And also, it is important to eat well, it's important to sleep well, but how you transition them from a poor lifestyle to a good one, that speed of transition, the pathway to getting them to that, which is important to do, that's as important. You just can't swing, like, you mean, it's like the Titanic. You just can't lift a handbrake and swing it round. You got to slowly transition them so that they buy in. You bring them along, and they understand that you're trying to help them for their long-term career. And so that's really, really important. And with the game as well, what I wanted people to recognize and start to introduce the conversation that it's a long conversation about recognizing the principles transfer across all sports, and you can learn from other sports, and you can start to look at the game using principles. That's the important thing. It's not really about the 5-3-1. It's about getting someone strong. What are the principles behind that? That was the goal, and it was, again, game changer. Could be a lot better. There's a lot of things that would change, a lot of things I would add to it, but I wanted to at least make people think and have conversations. If it's like anything that I've ever written, I've always said, do not take this as gospel. I wanted to make you think so that you can come to your own conclusions. And if it makes you think, then I've achieved the goal.
Yeah, it certainly did. I don't know, even being thrust into some data management type responsibility. The example from soccer, it was like, oh, so-and-so got lower high-speed yards. Are they dogging it? When in reality, they were an elite level defender and they were just always in the right spots. And like,
Exactly.
taking those principles and seeing it sometimes with, free safeties in football, I was like, man, this guy's racking up high-speed yards. Like, he really got after it practice. I was like, no, he was out of position and he was, oh shit, running to the back. Because he was in the wrong place, So some of those principles, like you said,
and
carry over from sport. Yeah.
Yeah, and you watch some linebackers, like, or some safety, like you said, and when you watch the film, you see beauty, like you see efficiency, so smart, like reading it so well, and then you're going, no, that's where I see where the tactical, technical, and the psychological component is. You can say compensating, but you can say, okay, that's actually probably a little bit more important than the physical. That's when you start to see it, when you watch the film. And like, that first penny first dropped with me when you're testing guys, PS data or numbers, and you're going, why is this guy so good in the weight room and in all the metrics, but when he's on the field, he's not performing? Or our best players have some of the worst numbers. Well, we're either not measuring the right thing or we're measuring the wrong things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I even saw that. Another specific example, we have some true freshman DBs who are like really high level athletes, but they don't know our scheme yet. And we're looking at like the explosive efforts or IMAs or whatever everybody calls it. But it was just like those quick movements, and they were significantly lower than everybody else. And it's like, what's happening? In reality, it was just they didn't know where to go. So they were just like freezing essentially, and then like slowly. Whereas like some of the higher level guys who like, I know I got to get there, and it was like, boom, I'm there.
Yes. Yeah.
Always, even when it's, hey, we got these numbers, they're clean, we got these nice dashboards. It's like, okay, but standing there at practice, I'm able to see like, oh, he's not dogging it. He just doesn't know what's going on.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that you'll see players, or you see coaches like will get caught up in the data. But the bigger issue in team sport and in college sport and in pros is the same. The data is always dirty as well. Like, it's very, very difficult to get true data. So, you see people publish papers and with data, and, if you've been there and you've tried to collect data and to make sure that it's clean, it's very, very difficult to do. Now, doesn't mean that's not important, but there needs to be an asterisk beside it. Like, I've tried to collect data in team sports. Like, you collect data over a period of time and 3 GPS systems don't work. So what do? Do you leave the guy out of the study? Do you find an average? Like, what do you, even forget about the study, even for you starting to set tolerances and bands, like understanding that there are date types and you can't compare like a Tuesday and a Thursday and take an average, and like even with just standard deviations, it's understanding this is dirty data. And now you got to use that, and that's fine. as long as you know how to use it intelligently.
Yeah, I even had somebody. We put out some videos, like kind of rolling out how we use our catapult and how our head coach interacts with us in terms of planning practice. And somebody like shot me a message like, hey, these are only averages, right? And I was like, yeah, that's part of, like, I said it in the thing, like, we're not going to get down to the exact, like, this player needs exactly 20 yards today, because it'd be silly to make that assumption, because there is so much chaotic elements to sports. But then also, like, is the GPS even that exact? It's dirty enough that making precise recommendations would be just making assumptions.
Yeah, now you've got like bands and rings, and that's a whole other bar, because first of all, what is it measuring? How are you measuring it? What are the metrics? Like, what are the recommendations being based off? Like, I mean, it's, and yeah, trying to be careful, but like, I mean, I know one team, like, looking at sleep monitoring and tried to measure like every single person. It was just a disaster. Like, you got to know how to use it, who you're going to use it with, what positions, what players, which players need it, before you actually, and again, this is what we're speaking about earlier when it comes down to coaching the coaches or consulting them, is being able to share with them, okay, look, if you're thinking of going down this route to measure this, here are some things that you need to think about. Like, how many are you going to measure? Does everybody need it? Are you going to piss off some person who doesn't need their sleep monitored and is already sleeping well? Who are key players? How much time are you going to invest in them? Who are your priority? Like, who are the guys that you really need to invest the time in? Like, those kind of things. How are you going to educate them? Can you do it without measuring even? Like, one of the statements that really bugs me is, if it's not measured, it won't improve. Said who? Said who? Like, you can actually make improvements without measuring things. A lot of improvements. So you got to be careful about just doing things because that's the way everybody else is doing them, or that's the way it's always been done. Use common sense.
Yeah, which isn't always common.
Which isn't always common. Some stuff is laughable. Like, I mean, if you like, you tell some stories, like, I mean, in military settings or in corporate settings, and people go, "What?" I'm going, "Yeah, this that's we would never even think of doing that." But, and particularly, I guess, well, it won't be as common now, but when you had so much money around in sport, and in collegiate sport in particular, people just spending money like on anything just to have. Now, I know recruiting is such an important thing, but it just became a case of, well, we've got the money, we better spend it, because if we don't spend it, we won't get it again next year. I don't know how many times I heard that. You've got this much money left, you better spend it, you better use it. And then you've got, like, for me, it was really, and it still is, like, spending money on the players from a health lifestyle perspective, like food, the quality of food, rather than on the technology that you're not going to really use. You think you are, because you can have a number, but let's get the big rocks in place first. Let's get them, let's get the culture right. Let's get the food right. Let's get the sleep, the recovery, the schedule right. And then we can start to narrow it down to, measuring these things that are important. Yes, but let's be very careful about specifically improving the limiting factors in the athlete as they need them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. That's probably a great little blurb to end on too. We really appreciated your time.
Thank you for having me.
I know you are a busy man in terms of all the writing and consulting and all that, so we appreciate you doing this for us. And yeah, really appreciate it.
Guys, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks a ton.